Hi guys, welcome back to Flower Class with Helen Olivia. My name is Madison and I'm going to be teaching today's workshop. I've been especially excited for this class. I think the product is really incredible. We're going to be using some of my favorite roses today, some really unique tulips and sweet pea. So lots of fun stuff that's going to go into this arrangement. I'm so excited about this bucket. Earlier today, we obviously delivered to you guys a bucket of beautiful product. You also received a bag inside which you'll find this beautiful kind of distressed stone, I guess, vase, ceramic maybe. This has been treated on the inside. It's been glaze coated on the inside, so it is water safe, so don't worry about anything leaking through. So a great vase to repurpose, or you could put a plant in it. So these specialty vases are pretty nice for class. You can get a little bit more life out of them. You also received a piece of chicken wire. I'm going to begin by cutting my piece of chicken wire in half. So if you don't have them handy, you might want to grab wire cutters. Honestly, I'm just going to use my regular clippers, but just make sure that you have some type of tool that is strong enough that it can clip through the chicken wire. You're also going to find a copy of our formula sheet. So our formula sheet basically just speaks to all the different flowers that we're going to be using in today's class, so you can follow along with that. Also gives you counts for each type of flower, which gives you a really good idea of kind of the ratio of different elements that go into making a completed bouquet. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Today in class, I'm using my favorite clippers. These are the Sabotin brand. We also really love using the ARS clippers in the shop, although you can certainly use just any pruner or floral clipper that you have. And also for demonstration purposes, going to be kind of switching and using my floral knife. So this particular one is just a Swiss Army knife, and it's really light and compact, so you can kind of fold it up and store it away. Although a sharp kitchen knife will also do the trick. Just make sure that it has a straight edge rather than a serrated edge. And all of these items, as well as a bunch of other tools and things that we use daily in the shop, are available on our Amazon storefront. And I will go ahead and post the link to that storefront below this video in the description box. So if you're curious about brands that we like, or you're just wanting to invest in some more tools, you should definitely check out our Amazon shop. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Before today's class, I went ahead and filled my vase to about 1.5 inches below the baseline. So it's kind of nice in this vase. We have a nice little measurement. So right where the kind of groove in the vase is a great place to kind of have your water hover around there. We are going to start by cutting this, about 1/3 of this chunk of chicken wire off. So I'm going to start cutting right around here. No specific like crazy measurement technique. This is a little bit too big for this size vase. So I'm going to cut off just, it's about 4 little knots worth of length of this chicken wire. So chicken wire is an excellent tool to have on hand at home. We use it every day in the shop. Definitely an integral part of our design technique here at Helen Olivia. The reason why we love it is because it will help to create some structure in your vase. So we're going to kind of get this size down to our vase correctly. And what it's going to do is create lots of little nooks and crannies that we can then insert our stems into. It's going to support everything. It's going to hold everything up, and it's going to allow you to be really intentional as you're designing to have things place something somewhere and have it stay there. There's not going to be a ton of shifting or falling over inside the vase. So I'm going to begin with my square of chicken wire. I'm going to start by folding it in half, and then I'm going to fold it in half again. So in doing so, I just created like a sloppy little dome shape, and I'm going to go ahead and put that into my vase. And then usually I'll just take my fingers and kind of spread the wire out a little bit so that it fills the vase out nicely. And then I'm just going to slide forward so you guys can see me a little bit better throughout class. if you look at it from above, what you'll see is that there are lots of little holes that we can then kind of put our stems into. So you don't need to concentrate on this grid at all. Don't feel like you need to put certain stems into certain holes. Just ignore it entirely and it's going to do its job all on its own. All right, so we have a few of my favorite types of foliage in class today, and that is what we're going to begin with, just to create like a nice lush base. So we'll pull out all of our different greens, and then we'll probably use them one by one. But the first one is this really lush piece of Ming fern. So very delicate, dainty, soft, kind of that perfect spring green color. So we are loving using this in the shop. And it really does a beautiful job of kind of like trailing out or peeking out amongst your flowers. So we'll go ahead and take that guy out. We also have Little Leaf Pit. So that is the variegated guy. So it's two different colors. It's a hybrid between a green and then kind of like an ivory color. So you may have more than one piece depending on how lush your pieces are. I have a couple in here. And then we may need to root around for it because I'm not seeing mine right away. But you should have a piece of Pierre Japonica, which looks like this guy. So usually a little bit shorter. Sometimes we'll have kind of like a burgundy little frond coming off the top. And I also have a few pieces of that. So just kind of root around gently. And you can see it kind of has these interesting little berry-like shapes at the end. Just root around and make sure that you've got all your greens out. And then once you've got them all out, just make sure that all of the rest of your stems get back into the vase and there's nothing that's sitting outside of water. Okay, I got all of mine. All right, so we are going to begin by laying out some of these greens to create some nice shape in our design, and then also to just give us some lush texture. So you can see this is more kind of like soft with some bounce. We have the Pierres, which is a little bit more rigid. And then we have the Little Leaf Pit, which has more of like a frilly texture to it. So all of these are going to be wonderful and they're going to blend beautifully together. I'm going to begin with probably one of my pieces. I'll start with my Little Leaf Pit. So this guy that's variegated has almost like a teeny little leaf that's kind of frilly looking. So you can see for this particular piece, I have lots of little jets that are coming off of a single stalk. I'm going to go ahead and just pull them apart so that I can use them at multiple places in the design. You may have some pieces that are like this, where it's just a single stalk with like a dense kind of collection of foliage at the top. And then you may have pieces like this where you can kind of just break them in half. So I'm going to begin by putting probably 3 pieces around the outside of my vase. So we can hold our greenery up. So where the greens kind of begin, I will line that up with my vase like so. So I'm just holding this green part up, kind of cascading over the side of my vase. Then I'm going to take my clippers and just snip the stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase. And then I will generally give it an extra ½ inch to an inch of a cut. And that will just make sure that it's sized right for the vase. Generally, it's just a smidge too long when I use that measuring technique. All right, so I've just gone in there. We will take a second piece of our Little Leaf Pit, and I'm going to go in on the other side using that same measuring technique, like so. And then I'm going to get one last piece over here on this other side. And it really does not matter what pieces you're pulling. So we're just kind of getting a few little pieces worked around the base of our arrangement, like so. I'm next going to take one of my pieces and I'm going to kind of get it high up so you can see the peak of our arrangement. So I like to use my thumb and pinky finger to measure my vase. So I'll get a measurement of this vase and then use that measurement to determine how tall to make my arrangement. So generally speaking, you want the floral part of your arrangement to be equal to the height of your vase. So this is the height of my vase, and I can kind of measure that up on top of my vase, and this will give me a nice peak to my arrangement. That's going to make sure that my arrangement is scaled nicely to my vase so that we don't have an arrangement that overwhelms our vase and we don't have an arrangement that's just being totally overwhelmed by the vase itself. So we can kind of measure our greens up here and then cut our stem. And then I'm going to get this next piece of greens kind of up top in my arrangement. So you can notice I'm not going straight up and down. I'm going to choose to cock off to one side or the other. It doesn't matter what side that is right now. But we can see again that I've measured out pretty well to this kind of height. And if yours is a little bit too long, you can certainly snip some off the top of it or adjust need as you need to. There are a few pieces of this guy left, and I'm going to just leave them behind for the time being. I'm going to pop them in at the end, depending on how much of this I want to add in. Sometimes when you add in your floral, you'll kind of lose some of the greens, so the greens kind of get hidden. So I like to always leave a little bit of greens behind so that I can pop them in at the end and make sure that there's still a nice representation of all the different types of greens in the finished arrangement. All right, so next up, we have our Pierre Japonica. This is, you can see these little seeds at the top. They're actually blooms that haven't bloomed out yet, but they look really beautiful and give it some nice texture when it does have these seeds. So I'm going to begin by, on both of my pieces, there's usually some low-lying green leaves. So I'm just going to pull away anything that's like halfway down or below. And then I'm just going to pop, I'm actually going to do both my Pierres kind of low. So I'm going to actually just pop these down low in my arrangement, and I'll turn so you guys can see what I'm doing. But I just kind of pop them in somewhere where you don't already have some greens. So anywhere where maybe you have an opening. So I'm going to do one on this side, and then I think for my second piece, I'm going to go over onto the other side. Okay. And now we're going to work in some of our mink fern. So I'm going to begin by probably cutting this into 3 separate pieces. So I'm just going to choose about 1/3 the way down. And then if you have any like long jetting off pieces, you can just cut that off to use on its own. And then I'm going to cut again another 1/3. All right, so for my bottom 2 pieces, the pieces that I cut last, I'm going to use those on the base of my arrangement too. So again, just looking for anywhere where I don't already have a piece of greenery. We can use that same measuring technique to get our stem length. And then I'm just popping some of this guy in around the outside of my base. So for this second piece, you may have to pull off a couple pieces of the low-lying little jets off just to make sure that you have enough stem to get into your vase. But we're going to pop this other guy in on the other side. Okay, beautiful. So you can see things are really shaping out quite nicely. For my last piece of mink fern, I'm going to actually kind of have this coming out of the top of my design. So we mentioned I'm going to pull off anything, give it enough stem, so maybe 3 to 4 inches of stem that's just cleared away. And then can kind of pinch them together. And I'm actually going to use this as kind of like an asymmetrical spray of greens out of the top of my arrangement. Or I could go kind of out of the side over here. So whatever speaks to you. It's going to reach outside of that kind of box of our height. So if yours is kind of, I'm going to get mine in. I think you could either go up here would be really pretty on this side, or I have like a nice gap over here. So I'm just going to kind of plug this last piece in over here. And you can see that it is kind of extending beyond that height. But because this is really soft and dainty, I can kind of work outside the framework of size because it's really delicate and it's just going to kind of accent things nicely. So don't feel like you need to, this is a strict kind of boxed out arrangement. You can definitely work outside of the framework that we've created. I have one little piece of mink fern I'm going to leave behind for later on and tuck in. And then I do have a couple of pieces of pit that I have left over that I'm going to pop in as a final step, just to kind of make sure that the greens are still well represented. All right, so we have so much good stuff in today's class. I'm very excited, but we're going to begin with our roses. This is one of my favorite varieties of rose that we're using a lot in the shop right now. It's called a purple moon. So it's kind of a hybrid between the outside looks more of like a pink, and then it kind of fades into like a lavender color, and then the core of it is almost like a peachy color. So very interesting and unique in terms of the color variation. It's almost like a sunset color, but it looks like this. And we should have 8 of them in our bucket. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull all 8 out right now. All right, and we are going to, step 1, clean up our roses. So I'm just going to move this guy off to the side for the time being. The first step will be to remove any leaves along the stem. You may see that there's kind of like a collar around the base of the rose head itself that are little leaves too. Those actually support the head of the flower. They protect that area where the petals themselves join to the actual stem. So if you remove those, what you'll find is that your petals start to kind of like disintegrate away. So definitely leave those little green guys that are up close to the top of the rose. But any other leaves along the length of a stem, I'm going to remove them. These guys have the gnarliest thorns. So just be careful as you're removing your leaves that you do try to avoid the thorns. And then step number 2 will be that we are going to actually take those thorns away. So if you're using clippers, the best technique is to just take your clippers and just snip them right off. So I'm literally just clipping the thorns off. If you are using a knife, the technique I like to use is just take the edge of the knife and kind of shave the thorns off. This tends to be a really quick removal, so I most often do this technique in the shop, but any of them will work. The final technique, if you're feeling brave, you can just take your thumb and push onto the side of the thorn and it will just break it away. So whatever speaks to you. The goal is that we're just going to remove all of these thorns before we get it into the vase. So the key here is we're trying to get rid of anything that will prevent the stem from like easily sliding into the vase. Also, as we start to add more flowers, if we have random like rogue thorns inside of the vase, they can actually puncture other stems as you're threading other stems into the arrangement. So we're just trying to make sure that we get rid of all of those so everything else will stay nice and healthy in our vase. All right, and then the final step to prepping our roses to get them into our arrangement is that we are going to remove any guard petals. So for the case of the purple moons, I will tend to leave them on if they're like somewhere, if they're partially imperfect, but the rest of the petal looks good. So I mentioned earlier that they're more of like a deep pink around the outside, fading into a lavender, and then a coral or peach color. So if I start to pull off a ton of leaves right off the get-go, you'll likely find that you're losing some of the variation in the rose color, but I am going to pluck off anything that has a huge imperfection. So that might be like a giant tear. It might be a terrible looking color, but just take a look at your roses. And if there's anything that's super distracting or majorly damaged, then I would go ahead and just pop off those petals. So your guard petals are those petals that are protecting the flower as it's developing. So when it's a little baby bud on the bush, these petals are the ones that are on the outside of the bud. And they are going to take the beating from things like wind, rain, hands as it's being harvested, etc. So they do have a really important job, and there's a reason why they look imperfect. Generally, it's because they've done a really great job protecting the innards of the flower. All right, so we have quite a few of these roses. In order to make sure that they are spread evenly throughout this design, I'm going to kind of put them into pockets. So I'm going to do a pocket of 3 roses. I'm going to do a pocket of 3 roses, and I'm going to do a pocket of 2 roses. So generally speaking, when you have a lot of a single element in a design, it looks very pleasing to the eye to see groupings of 3. And that's because that's how things tend to grow in nature. So it looks just really natural and organic to see those groupings represented in the design. So taking a look at my arrangement, I'm going to do kind of 3 different pockets on each side of my design. My first pocket, I'm going to kind of get high up in my design. So I really want to spread this color throughout. So different heights and then also kind of different sides of the design. So my first pocket's going to be a high pocket right up top. So we'll take one of our roses, does not matter which one, just pull from one of your piles. And then I'm going to kind of hold my rose up. So it's kind of in line with that top piece of pit that we placed out earlier. And then I can use my clippers to clip the stem where it looks like it's going to hit the bottom of the vase, plus usually like an extra 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to go in with my first rose. You can see again, I'm not going in up and down like a flagpole. I'm going to cock off to one side. There happens to be a little bit more space on this side of the design. There's less greenery on the side, so that's why I chose to go off to this side. But for you guys, it may be kind of an even displacement of greens, in which case I would just go for whatever side speaks to you at the moment. All right, so next rose, I'm going to get a little bit lower than that. So alongside the first, but a little bit lower. There we go. So looking at it from the side, you can see that I've got one rose here and then another rose here. And then my last rose in that pocket, I'm going to get alongside kind of between the two. So it's almost going to create like a triangular shape. So we can measure this last rose up, give it a nice cut. And then I'm going to make sure that doesn't matter which rose it is, but one of my roses is either a little bit farther out or a little bit deeper in than the rest. So you can see this rose is a little bit farther out than my other two. Any shapes that your brain can recognize in the design, it's going to kind of draw your eye right towards that shape. So your brain would recognize this kind of triangular shape as being familiar, and then you'd hone in on that space. So in order to kind of counter that and work against the perfect triangular shape, we can either make our shape irregular, or we can have kind of play with our planes. So you could have one rose a little bit deeper in or one rose a little bit farther out, which is what I did. I tend to find that I struggle with dimension in my designs. So I will usually gravitate towards kind of working with planes, because that will kind of force me to make sure there's a little bit of variation so things don't look too round and perfect. All right, so pocket number 2, I'm going to kind of get opposite that over here, but lower. So I think I'll do a pocket of 3 again. So with this one, instead of starting up high in our design, we're going to start about halfway down. So I can hold my rose up there, give my stem a nice cut, and then we'll pop this first one in that collection about halfway down. Number 2 is going to go beneath that first one. Like so. This one's going to be almost like resting right on the edge of the vase. And then our third one in that pocket will go alongside the last 2, but just remember to either push it in a little bit deeper or leave it a little bit farther out, so that it doesn't look like a perfect triangle in the design. So for me, I chose to leave that one a little bit farther out. All right, so I already love this arrangement. I think it's really pretty in this vase. And I'm super fond of these deep or purple moons, so I like it a lot. All right, we're gonna turn all the way around. Now we have a big expanse of green over here, and I'm gonna break that up with my final 2 roses. So this is the designer's choice. You could either go kind of high up, you could start halfway down again. I'm going to do somewhere in between the 2. So getting my last 2 roses, just kind of adding some color into this side of my design. Okay, beautiful. So next up, I think I'm going to go for our Ivory Medulla spray roses. So we should have 3 of the Ivory Medullas. They are the rose that it looks like a much smaller version of a full-size rose. And then these guys are like this soft, faint blush color. And they tend to blow out really beautifully. So they're going to be really nice and lush and open. So we should have 3 of those guys, and we'll pull them out all at once. So first Ivory Medulla spray rose. Actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and start by just cleaning them up a little bit, removing any leaves along the length of the stem, the same way that we did with our full-size roses. You'll notice that these guys luckily don't have any thorns, so you don't need to worry about that, but just be careful. Go ahead and just pulling off the leaves. I tend to be really crazy, and I literally remove every single leaf off these guys so that they're perfectly cleaned up. If you have any long jets off that are just super, super long and they seem kind of disjointed from the rest, you can actually just pull that guy off and use it as its own bud. So, but the rest of these are kind of all clustered together up top, so I am going to leave those as one. So you can go through and just remove the rest of our leaves off of each of these stems. All right, so my first spray rose, I kind of want to pop into this area here. There's a big kind of bulk of green here, and I want to lighten it up with a little bit of color. So I'm going to take any of my spray roses, it does not matter which one. I kind of want this to be low. So we'll measure our stem up kind of right near the baseline, and then we can give it a cut. And I'm going to pop that first spray into this pocket here. There we go. So we've got one there. We can turn our arrangement all the way around, and then you can see the same kind of situation is happening up front here with a big pocket of greens that is that could use a little bit of lightening up. So I'm going to get my second spray rose into that area. So just holding it up so that it looks like it's going to fill this region out, giving it a nice cut, and then we can work it in right there. If you have any guard petals or anything that's really bruised, you can just pop them off at this point. I like to pop them off after I've gotten them into the arrangement just because it's easier to kind of see what I'm working with. But you can pop off anything that is imperfect. I'm going to turn this so I can see, because when I design towards the camera, I have no idea what it looks like. This second guy in. There we go. And then the third spray rose will be a designer's choice. So I think this would be a great kind of place to put the third spray rose. So kind of over here, so that we've spread this color throughout. I think you could also get one kind of up top if you have a huge open area. Up top would be a great place. I'm going to shoot for this zone over here because I do have a lot of greens and I don't have any of this color kind of represented on this side of the design. So in terms of height, totally a designer's choice, whatever speaks to you. But I kind of just popped that last spray in right there. And then if you did kind of pull away any of those smaller buds, you can just pop them in alongside one of your other pockets. Okay, so next up, we're going to go for, let's see if there's a specific, the penny pink. Oh boy, I think that's such a good name for this, penny pink. So kind of that like rusty colored pink, almost looks like an old penny, more of like a brown color. So you should have two of them. I believe we are getting these guys from one of our local growers. So a really special one. If you have a piece that looks like this, where the split is really, it's giving you two long stalks, I would go ahead and just break those apart. And then if you have a piece like this, where all of them are kind of collected up top, I would leave those together. So I'm going to use these to kind of fill out my design. So my first one, I would just look for anywhere up top where you have kind of a big hole. So for me, if I'm looking at mine from above, there happens to be a big hole right here. So for this first hellebore, I'm going to pop him up top in the design. And you can kind of just have him hovering above the rest. So rather than submerging the hellebore so that it's really tight in with the rest of your flowers, my recommendation would be to kind of just let it float above the rest of your flowers. And I'll show you what that would look like. But this gives a little bit more space. You can kind of see what the pattern of the flower grows in when it's in nature. So kind of just having it drift out, and it's totally okay to have it floating above the rest of your flowers. You can see there's still some nice bounce in there, which is really pretty. All right, so I've got one on that side. Now I'm going to work on getting a second piece of hellebore. Kind of when I have one high on this side, I kind of want to get something low on the opposite side. So for my second piece, I'm going to kind of have it drifting out of the front here. And I have this nice pocket of green that I want to lighten up with some of this beautiful hellebore. So kind of some floating over there. And then if you've broken yours apart, you can kind of pop your last one in on this side of the design, which is what I am doing. There we go. Okay. Next up, we are going to go for our tulips. So this particular variety of tulip is so pretty. It's a brownie double tulip. So this is actually what they do is they take a double white tulip and then they submerge the stem in kind of like a mauve colored dye, and then the veins of the flower sucks that up, and you can see it actually seeps into the veins and the petals themselves. So what it looks like on the actual petal almost looks like the petal was like painted on. So these guys are so crazy beautiful. And then you also get some kind of variation in the leaves as well. So I'm going to take off the majority of the leaves, maybe leaving on one or two if they're really nice and up top near the face of the flower. So we should have, I think, 4 of them. So we'll go ahead and just take all 4 out at the same time. And for the sake of today's class, I kind of want to, rather than placing them 4 separate places in the design, I kind of want to do 2 and 2 together so that they look like they're kind of, that's how they would grow naturally. This is more of like an organic loose design. So I'm going to do 2 groupings together so that they look really natural and nice. So my first grouping, I'm going to just choose somewhere up top where I don't have much going on. That happens to be right here. So we can hold our tulip up. Your tulips are going to open a lot. So it's similarly to our hellebore. I am going to kind of let them float a little bit higher than the rest of my flowers so that there is space for them to open up. So now I'm going to get a second one kind of over besides that first. So it doesn't have to be like perfectly next to it. It's just kind of looking like this would be growing alongside or near our other one out in nature. Okay, so we've got 2 up top, and I'm going to counter that by doing 2 lower on this side of my design. So I'm just going to put them in first, and then I'll turn so you guys can see. So I have 2 up top on this side, so I'm going to do 2 lower on the opposite side. So I'll get these guys in, and then I will turn so you guys can see where I place them. So we have up top tulips over here, and then my second 2 tulips are going here and here, so a little bit lower on the opposite side. Okay, awesome. So now we're going to use some phlox. So we introduced those really light colored spray roses, which now is contrasting a lot with some of our darker, deeper elements in this design. So in order to kind of tie those in, we're going to introduce another lighter element, and that is our phlox. So phlox is one of my favorite spring flowers to use. Has this beautiful kind of collection of pristine blooms up top, and then some spade-like leaves on the length of it. We're going to remove the leaves so that we just have 2 really beautiful kind of like orbs of white floral. And then I'm going to do 1 up top in my design and 1 lower opposite that to get some balance. So again, look for somewhere where either you don't have, I have 1, 2, 3, a lot of that white along the base of my arrangement. So I'm going to begin with getting one piece a little bit higher in my design. So anywhere up top where you feel like you want to just pop in that white flux. Show you, I got mine in over here. So then for my second piece of flocks, I'm going to make sure that it's lower and on the opposite side of the design. So I'm up here, and then my second one, I think I'm going to go over here. Okay, awesome. Now for our final element, and my absolute favorite in class. So I'm a huge fan of Sweet Pea, and I just think this color is so beautiful. So they've done a similar technique as with the tulips, where the veins kind of just suck up that pretty color. Super soft and delicate. So you can still smell the sweet pea smell, so that traditional, lovely sweet pea smell. And I'm going to do the same as before, where I get one kind of up top and then one opposite that on the other side. So for my first one, I kind of want it to be drifting out. I have a big pocket of greens happening right here, so I'm just going to kind of introduce the sweet pea amongst those greens to break that up a little bit. Top. And then we'll counter that by doing our second piece of sweet pea opposite that, but a little bit lower. So for me, that will look like nice and tight in here. Second one will go over here. So yeah, at this point, my suggestion would be to take a look at your design head on, and then also getting a little bit lower and see, is there anywhere where that would benefit from having a little bit more of these greens. So up top, I don't really have much of this mink fern. So I'm going to pop one piece of mink fern up top. Maybe around the base, you can still kind of see into, maybe you have a gap where you can kind of see into your arrangement. That might be a good place to kind of pop in some of this little leaf pit. But just kind of looking and see, where do I feel like I either am not seeing this type of green, or maybe I'm seeing too much base, and you can kind of nestle in some more of these greens. Maybe you also have a place in your arrangement where you're just seeing so much floral and there's no greens to really break that up. That might be a great place to pop in some of your leftover greens as well. And don't feel like you need to put all of your greens in. I'm actually going to just leave this guy behind, because I really don't feel like I need it much. Seems really full and lush as is. Okay, so that is it. I loved this arrangement. I think it's just so pretty. I love the color so much. So I hope that you guys had fun in class today. We have so many interesting classes coming up. There's wreath making classes. There's Easter centerpiece classes, which are going to be in there's going to be, gosh, I can't remember which one we're doing, but I think it's a rabbit that we're kind of filling with floral. There's kids classes coming up. There are, oh my gosh, just so many classes. Peonies classes, because we're about to drift into peony season. So we added the majority of our classes through the end of the summer about a week and a half ago. So if you haven't looked at our website recently, I would definitely tell you guys to check those out and see if there's anything that does interest you. We are having a lot of our classes sell out recently. So if there is a class that interests you, I would recommend getting into it sooner rather than later. And then especially some of the classes like the Easter centerpiece class and the wreath making classes, we do have a limited number of supplies to dedicate towards those classes. So would also recommend getting into those earlier if those speak to you. But we will see you again in class soon. Hopefully you guys had fun and will enjoy this arrangement. Just make sure that it's away from drafting heat, so not next to a heat vent or on top of maybe the surface where your dishwasher is, somewhere that gets really warm, or in pouring down sunlight. So you wouldn't want to put it in the sunny windowsill, but if it's in a room that gets sunlight, that's totally fine. Make sure that you're adding water to your arrangement. So either using a measuring cup or a turkey baster, I would go ahead and add like half a cup of water every other day into your arrangement, and that will make sure that everything stays really pretty and beautiful, hopefully until we see you in class again next week. All right, you guys have a great rest of your day, and we will see you again soon.